A new report from the New York Times alleges that the US military has drawn up plans to deploy troops to Nigeria. That's in order to quell violence against Christians.
This comes after President Trump's post to Truth Social last Friday called out the alleged persecution of Christians in the West African nation, and he doubled down in a video on social media this week.
Christianity is facing an existential threat in Nigeria. Thousands and thousands of Christians are being killed. Radical Islamists are responsible for this mass slaughter. I am hereby making Nigeria a country of particular concern. That's a legal definition. When the Christians or any such group is slaughtered, like is happening in Nigeria, 3,100 versus 4,476 worldwide. What horrible numbers. The United States cannot stand by while such atrocities are happening in Nigeria and numerous other countries. It's not only Nigeria, it's all over. We stand ready, willing, and able to save our great Christian population around the world.
Over the weekend, Trump threatened to mobilize American troops as well as cut off aid and assistance to Nigeria. He posted on Truth Social, if the Nigerian government continues to allow the killings of Christians, the USA will immediately stop all aid and assistance to Nigeria and may very well go into that now disgraced country, guns a-blazing, to completely wipe out the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible atrocities. I'm hereby instructing our Department of War to prepare for possible action. If we attack, it will be vast, vicious, and sweet, just like the terrorist thugs attack our cherished Christians, warning the Nigerian government better move fast. And some members of Congress seem to be backing him up.
That's right. Texas Senator Ted Cruz introduced a bill, that was back in September, that would sanction Nigerian officials who were deemed complicit in the violence. And Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville said this week that he would support President Trump should he send troops to Nigeria. But according to that New York Times report, putting boots on the ground may not do much to help. The Times reports that the violence and land disputes in Nigeria have killed thousands of Muslims and Christians alike, and, quote, militant groups like Boko Haram and the Islamic State West Africa province have targeted Christians in Nigeria, along with many Muslims accused of not being devout enough. Any major military operation by the United States would be likely to fail, current and former military officials said.
Well, I don't like the idea of boots on the ground anywhere, really, and I don't like them without, again, Congress being the appropriate body to declare war on these radical groups in Nigeria. Now, that said, there has been a use of authorization for military force against ISIS and radical Islamic terrorist groups like Boko Haram that are active there. Boots on the ground would be a step further than we should certainly go. If there is, frankly, bombings or logistical support we can provide to target Islamic radicals that are also America's enemies, that is fine by me. It's not about protecting just Christians, and I'm glad that Trump did say and other groups in his remark, because I've seen videos of the Boko Haram leaders calling for deaths of everyone who gets in their way. It's really, you know, I mean, these are demonic cults of just
religious
homicidal
really.
maniacs. This is just ISIS is just a death cult at the end of the day. Sanctioning them, if there's a plan to do that and why that would help, fine. I'm skeptical of sanctions. I don't really want to send aid to other countries anyway, so if they want to cancel that, I'm also fine by that. What do you think?
Well, I think that any form of religious violence is wrong, and I think it's wrong when it targets Christians, and I think it's wrong when it targets, you know, insufficiently devout Muslims or anything. I am very I mean, it seems almost superfluous to say, I'm very opposed to religious fanaticism. Now, I think that Trump, I mean, although he did add the word and other groups or whatever, at other times he does seem to have stressed very much his concerns with Christians. When he was talking about the worldwide picture, he was also talking about protecting Christians. I think people of all faiths should be protected, and there is genuine dispute about whether the violence in Nigeria is targeting Christians more so than just anybody who doesn't fit within this tiny sliver of sort of lunacy that Boko Haram.
But it is right. But there is violence.
There is
really
violence, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, then there's the other question of what the United States should do about it. Some of the violence, setting aside the Boko Haram thing, is this sort of peculiar and bloody struggle between predominantly Christian farmers and predominantly Muslim herders, and it's a battle partly about resources as well as religion. I say that to say, we're going to send the Marines in to like police a dispute over who has the right to water in a particularly rural part of Nigeria? Like that seems an unwise thing to even contemplate. Perhaps there is some measure of sanctioning that could be done. I'm certainly not saying you should do nothing, but the idea that the US should sort of invade on behalf of Nigerian Christians doesn't seem a sensible thing to suggest.
Right. It doesn't seem particularly America first to me. I mean, unfortunately, in troubled parts of the world, in Africa, in the Middle East, in certain parts of Southeast Asia, there are struggles, there are violent clashes between ethnic groups, between religions. I don't think the U.S. is obligated to intervene. We don't want to be the world's policeman. That attitude has been very well repudiated. It's not because we should be indifferent to other people's suffering as Christians or just as moral people or as whatever. Certainly we're not, but we have to have a little bit of humility now about our ability to fundamentally alter the shape of conflict. You know, we've gone in and killed tons of people and tried to rebuild countries and tried to foster democracy only to have it become less stable. Right. So we also don't want to put our troops in harm's way, again, for what? Yeah. Now, again, not to say nothing can be done. ISIS, on some level, has attacked Americans, and there's an authorization to kill terrorists to the extent we don't put our own people in harm's way. Mm-hmm. So that's fine to me. But I wouldn't just be sending in the troops willy-nilly per Trump's orders without Congress. Again, Congress should talk about these things. Right. Then we could hear arguments for or against. Wouldn't that be amazing if on the steps, on the actual floor, you had Ted Cruz could explain why he thinks this is a good idea, and maybe Rand Paul would explain why he doesn't think it's a good idea, and you could hear a debate on Denver. They could debate, they could discuss, and they could take a vote on it. Right. That is how it's supposed to work. Right. That is a good system. That is the system that our Constitution prescribes, and it's a good thing. Please do that.
Well,
instead of sitting behind closed doors, briefings that we're not privy to, and most of the elected representatives and senators aren't privy to either.
Well, I agree, but I don't think Trump agrees. I mean, that's the fundamental problem. I mean, he and the people around him believe in this very expansive vision of the president's powers, the unitary executive, the idea that the president can just declare emergencies or simply not consult with Congress at all, as we see in the instance of Venezuela, for example, and the attacks on the vessels in the Caribbean, which, to be fair, Rand Paul and you have been very critical of. But, I mean, Trump just seems to think you can just do that. You can just go and kill people and, trust me, bro.
And this seems, frankly, even more of a stretch than the Venezuela situation because they're in our backyard, so to speak, and there's, to the extent the fentanyl's coming into the U.S. and it's a little bit in our neighborhood. Yeah. This is far flung from the U.S.
And an enormous, 220 million people in Nigeria. You're going to suddenly insert American troops in the middle of it. That seems unwise to me. Anyway, coming up, as Marjorie Taylor Greene continues to criticize her own party, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has a theory on what she calls the GOP Congresswoman's revenge tour. Right back after this.